There are now more people than ever seeking asylum in Ireland, with around 18,500 people applying for international protection here last year. But recent figures published in the Irish Mail on Sunday show that 85% of those are now being refused asylum in the first instance. That's an increase from around 50% in 2017. So what does all that tell us about how our immigration system is working? Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Cathal Malone, who's head of research at Thomas Coughlan & Co Solicitors, and Michael McDowell, who's independent senator and former Minister for Justice, and you're both welcome to the programme. Cathal, I just want to start with you on those figures. So the numbers of people coming here, that's higher. More and more people, though, are being turned away in the first instance. Now, the Minister for Justice says that this shows that too many people are coming to Ireland looking for asylum who aren't entitled to it. What's your view?
Well, the first thing, Claire, is to say that there has been a massive push from the Department of Justice of late to speed up processing times. And of course, that is to some degree welcome, but there is, I suppose, a minimum period of time that it takes for people to actually, first of all, get to the country. And of course, a lot of people are not being given accommodation, as we know. So there are people on the streets who are having their applications processed in a matter of weeks. And many of these people are not being able to access lawyers in the time that it's taking to produce a first instance decision, which at the moment can be literally 2 to 3 months after you arrive in Ireland. So obviously, if people can't access legal advice at the first stage of the process, then that's going to create an issue. The second thing is that nobody's mentioning the fact that actually about a third of the appeals are being successful in what's known as the International Protection Appeals Tribunal. So it is very interesting to hear both Minister O'Callaghan and the Taoiseach consistently referring to an increase in refusals at first instance, but never mentioning that the rate of success on appeal is actually quite high.
And has that increased?
No, it's actually remained pretty steady of late. But again, there's probably a reason for that. So in the last couple of years, both Minister McEntee and Minister O'Callaghan have said that they want to add many more countries to what's known as the safe countries list. Now, I and many of my colleagues would have serious issues with some of these countries that have been added. For example, we recently added Algeria. Now, it's still illegal to be gay in Algeria, punishable by imprisonment. The Department of Foreign Affairs on website advises against non-essential travel to large parts of Algeria due to the possibility of terrorist attacks, and warns Irish LGBT travellers that if they are essentially caught, with their partner in public expressing their love for one another, that they're likely to end up in prison.
In danger, so it won't be safe for that person, is what you're saying.
And that if you were a gay Algerian coming to Ireland, though, you're treated as being from a safe country. They rush your application through the first instance in about 2 months, and then you don't get an oral hearing on your appeal, which also happens to be the first time you're going to have any meaningful access to a lawyer.
But can the government legitimately say the system is more efficient now?
Well, there's a difference between, I suppose, speed and efficiency. I mean, I think Einstein said everything should be made as simple as possible and no simpler. And what I would say is things should be made as efficient as possible, but no more efficient. Because, as I say, at the present time, I think the rate of refusal at first instance for people from so-called safe countries is currently at 88%. So, we know, and China has a conviction rate of 99.9%, and we said that's indicative of a justice system that doesn't work. And, if we're heading for a situation where we're refusing over 90% of people, I think that's indicative of a system that's not properly considering claims.
Well, let's bring in Senator Michael McDowell on this. So the system is working faster. More people are being rejected at the first instance, as has just been explained to us. In your view, does this mean the system is working better?
I think it is working slightly better, but I think there are fundamental problems with it. And Claire, there are two things I'd like to say. First of all, that the European Union has taken over as a competence the procedures and the law effectively relating to asylum seeking. And as a result, because it's, the right to asylum is written into the European Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, it effectively has almost constitutional status in Ireland, as have the decisions of the court in Luxembourg, the European Court of Justice. Right across Europe, there is a perception, and it's a growing perception, not just simply among hard-right politicians in Hungary, but among centrist politicians in Poland, Germany, and Holland, and places like that, that the 1951 Convention on refugees is no longer practical or sustainable. And you know, I take the very example that was given: a man in Algeria who wants to come to Ireland because homosexuality is illegal in Algeria. Why does he come to Ireland? What is it about Ireland that he chooses? There are no direct flights for him to come to Ireland. He comes to Ireland because he wants to, he doesn't go to anywhere else in Europe. He comes indirectly through other European states, and he comes here to Ireland to assert that because homosexuality is illegal and a criminal in this country, he wants the Irish people to accept him to come and live in Ireland. Now, that is not what the 1951 Convention was all about. And the reality, Claire, is that the vast majority of asylum seeking in Ireland is, in fact, economic migrancy dressed up as asylum seeking.
What do you say to that, Cathal?
Well, first of all, I suppose I would thank the Senator for being upfront and honest about what it is he believes, because ultimately what we're talking about here is repealing a significant part of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, repealing the Geneva Convention 1951 on the status of refugees, and in fact going a step further, because that convention was itself built on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which also contained the right to asylum. So essentially what we're talking about doing here is repealing every foundational human rights instrument in European and indeed world history, all in an effort to disadvantage, in this example, the gay Algerian man that Senator McDowell believes shouldn't be coming here now. And on the point of why is he coming here and not somewhere else in Europe, there are two very important points that have to be made. Number one, we have had a significant increase in the number of applications for asylum since COVID. But that has only brought us up now to being at the European average of applications per capita. It's about 2.5 per thousand. We were actually, all of the years up to COVID, basically receiving the lowest number of applications for asylum per head of population of anywhere. You would have 1 million people could arrive into Greece or Italy because, of course, they're on the frontiers. And it isn't fair that just because your country happens to be on the edge of Europe, that you get significantly more and that we don't share the burden. The second thing that we have to say is that actually the majority of refugees worldwide are not in developed countries. 1/4 of the population of Lebanon is currently refugees, mainly Syrians and Palestinians, fleeing those two awful conflicts.
People will go to the nearest place that they can get to, in other words. But what about that claim that the great majority of asylum seekers are exploiting international protections? They're not seeking asylum, they're economic migrants. That's what Michael McDowell is saying.
Well, first of all, there are of course a certain number of people in the system who are economic migrants. The point I'm making is that in the way that we are assessing these applications currently, we are rejecting quite a number of people who in fact are genuine refugees. And if you think about the consequences of that, that means that we are sending them back potentially to places where the horrific fate may await them. The second thing I would say is that actually the employment permit system and the legal migration system in this country is completely broken. It was set up at a time when we were, in a bad economic place. We are now beyond full employment. And in fact, for the people who are coming here as economic migrants and who feel that they have to go into the protection process because they have no better way to come, if the Minister, and if he would work with his colleague, the Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment, would loosen up the employment permit system so that people could apply to come here the right way, many of those wouldn't try and come here the wrong way.
Well, what do you say to that, Michael McDowell, that really is the side of the system that needs to be looked at?
Well, no, I mean, let's be clear about this. You're talking about millions of people there, Cathal, arriving in Italy and places like that. This is not what the 1951 Convention was all about, that millions of people would migrate to the Mediterranean countries from Africa and from the Middle East. It's not about that. It was brought in very, very different circumstances where people who faced political persecution in their country were given protection in a very small number of cases. It was never intended to deal with everybody in Algeria, who is homosexual, saying, I will choose some country in Europe, I'll go there, and they would be obliged under international law to accommodate me because of the state of the criminal law in Algeria. And we've got to be truthful about this. It isn't simply the case. We aren't simply in a position where we can just simply take in 15,000 people who every year come here seeking employment. They are allowed to work. We have to accommodate them. We have to provide welfare for them and the like while they are awaiting adjudication of their claims. It makes a complete nonsense of national sovereignty if people can simply say, I'm here, I'm gay, I'm Algerian, and I want to stay in Ireland. That's enough. And once I establish that, Ireland is obliged First of all, to put me in social welfare. Secondly, after a period, to allow me work. And I jump all queues in relation to employment permits and the like. That's nonsense, and most people in Ireland believe that's
Cathal, that's quite the charge, that it makes a mockery of national sovereignty.
Well, I have to first of all take up Senator McDowell on the first point he made, which is that the 51 Convention on Refugees was never intended for mass migration of people fleeing, let's just say, war, and was in fact supposed to be limited to individual political dissidents. I've heard this trope thrown out before, and it's simply not true. The 51 Convention, when it was brought in, was initially limited to events that occurred in Europe before the 1st of January 1951. It was explicitly to deal with the mass flows of people occurring as a result of World War II. It wasn't until 1967, which was what was known as the New York Protocol, that it was extended to any time in any country. But from 1951 to 1967, it only operated in respect of people who essentially had been forced to leave their houses because of the movement of the Soviets and of the Nazis, and indeed of the invading armies from the West. So it was never intended for individual political dissidents in the manner that Michael is suggesting. And the vast majority of people who are coming into Europe at the present time are coming because of conflict in Sudan, in Eritrea, in Gaza, in Afghanistan, etc. And those are people who were absolutely captured by the original intention.
Can we take in 15,000 people under this scheme every year? Michael McDowell says we can't.
Well, we absolutely can take in 15,000 people. And the point is that when we're taking them in, what's really happening is that we're being faced with the housing crisis, which is pre-existing. We're being faced with the crisis of healthcare that's pre-existing and has been. I mean, anybody in this country who's lived here for whether 20, 30, 50 years will know we've always had a problem with adequate housing and with adequate healthcare, and indeed with education.
You can't look at those two things in isolation, can you? You can't say, well, the housing crisis isn't the fault of the 15,000 people who come in, and that's fine. But you have to acknowledge it exists, and it is a problem.
It absolutely exists, but the government are at the present time attempting to scapegoat 15,000 people coming in and say that is what is overloading to some degree the housing sector or the health sector, when in fact we are actually bringing in necessarily to work in our industries, because we haven't got enough people in Ireland to do it, many multiples of that 15,000 in any given year to work in the construction industry, to work in our hospitals. I mean, if we weren't bringing people in to work in the Irish Health Service, it would collapse in the morning. So,
but I mean, with the greatest of respect, it is not refugees who are keeping the health service going, or asylum seekers. And I mean, that's a delusion. We do have an employment permit system which enables really good people to come to Ireland who work for us and do valuable work for us in the health system and in various other sectors of the economy, including the construction industry, where they are needed.
Okay.
And where people establish that there is a need of that kind, the government does issue work permits to them. But what we're dealing with here is something radically different. I mean, what you are standing up for is the proposition that somebody who's in Algeria, who claims that they are gay, and assume that they are right, they are gay, that they can come to Ireland or any other country in Europe of their choice and say, put me up, let me in,
But Senator, your solution is to abolish the right to asylum.
I'm not suggesting. I'm saying that we have to look again at those conventions to see, is what's happening sustainable? Is it sustainable that 1 million people are crossing the Mediterranean every year to land in Spain and Italy and Greece?
Okay, gentlemen, unfortunately, I have to leave it there. We could continue, but unfortunately the clock is against us.